Well, without further ado, let's begin. Welcome to the Global Conversation. I'm Isabel Kumar, and I'm joined, as you've heard, by European Commission President José Manuel Barroso, and of course all of you wonderful Erasmus students who've come from across Europe. So we're here to discuss the EU's Nobel Peace Prize, the economy, youth, and the future of Europe. And I'm going to start by taking a question straight away from one of our Erasmus students, and that's Maria Isabel from Iceland. Could you stand up, please?
Mr. President, my question for you is, do you see the EU, or how do you see the EU as a good laureate for the Nobel Peace Prize?
Thank you very much. First of all, let me just say thank you to the University of Oslo for this great hospitality. It's so good to be here. I love universities, and to be in such an excellent university with such a great tradition, it's really the best setting to have this discussion with you. Answering your question, yes, I believe the European Union deserves the prize. We are, of course, humbled and honored, but we believe it's a deserved prize. Why? The European Union, if you think about it, is the most successful project ever of transnational cooperation. Never in the history of mankind we had 27 countries that decided freely to share sovereignty, to put their capacities together around the values of peace, but also freedom and democracy. And it was a great contribution for the unification of the continent, but also a contribution for these values, like the value of freedom. So yes, we have many imperfections. We should not be complacent with the problems we have in the European Union, but for everything the European Union has achieved in terms of peace, of democracy and freedom, certainly it deserves the prize. At the same time, we have to take it as an encouragement for the future. Also, what we can do for the global order in the making. That's why I was so moved yesterday when I was in this Nobel Prize ceremony award, because it was so important, that spirit. And I believe it's an encouragement for us to go on and to defend these values in the wider world.
Mr. President, though, the Nobel, the EU receiving the Nobel, has received a cacophony of criticism. What do you say to your detractors?
I respect all opinions. In fact, the European Union also, the freedom of opinion is a sacred principle. And I have to disagree with some of those criticisms. I think they are not fair. At the same time, I understand the frustration of many of the criticisms, because we are living in difficult times in Europe. In some of our countries, there are huge sacrifices. I've been saying there is a situation of social emergency, namely because of unemployment. And so people are sad, sometimes they are angry with the current situation, and it's normal that they express their dissatisfaction. But at the same time, I think, as I've said, that the European Union certainly deserves the prize for the values it represents, it embodies, for what have been achieved in terms of peace, democracy and freedom. And we should take it, as I said, as an encouragement also to address the concerns of those that today are protesting. Even if sometimes, let's be also fair, the protest should be against those who created the current situation. And it was not the European Union the cause of the problem. The current difficulties were created by the financial crisis. It was not created by the European Union. The European Union, to some extent, is the victim of this. We are not the problem, we are part of the solution. Mistakes were done in the financial sector. Mistakes were done also in the national management of the debt. And we are now trying to respond to those problems.
But the response is painfully slow. So in some respects, people do want to hold somebody accountable now. So maybe the root cause, it's difficult to find somebody to hold accountable, but people are holding the EU accountable for the difficulties in combating the crisis today.
Yes, and we, of course, are always ready to assume our responsibilities, but the reality is not the European Union that created the problem. We are the solution or part of the solution. We need more Europe to respond, for instance, to the problems we have in the financial sector. Until now, the supervision was purely national. Now we are creating a European system of supervision to know exactly what is going on in the banks. But until now, we had no responsibility on that matter. So that's why we take this as an encouragement for what we have to do in the future so that we can have the instruments to respond to some of these challenges.
And you touched upon the fact that the crisis is posing a threat to peace. And we have Justine from Malta, who's here. If you could stand up and give us your question.
My question. For the past 60 years, Europe has managed to maintain peace between its member states. What are the plans for the EU to maintain this?
We are very serious when we say that we should never take peace for granted. We have in the history of Europe and in the history of other parts of the world awful experiences. This is the reason why the European Union is so important, is to avoid to make the same mistakes again. And so what we are doing is to reinforce this culture of peace, of democracy. We believe that it's much more difficult for democracies to enter in war because the basic principles, the values are the same, and we are in fact spreading these values all over Europe by the enlargement. Now we are 27. The European Union started with 6 countries. Now we are 27, very soon 28. Another country that was belonging to the Yugoslavia, and it was also going through extremely painful situations, is going to join us next year. And so not only we consolidate peace among our members, but we can be a way of expanding this stability in our neighborhood, at least in the European neighborhood. And I think this is extremely important.
So if we bring this question of peace back to the Nobel Peace Prize, obviously, which is why we're here, social unrest, so beyond war, social unrest in Europe, I think, is an all-time high since the inception of the EU. And it's a lot of these, probably not these kids, but, you know, youth who feel that they have no future. How can we combat that?
Many ways. First of all, at European level, we have to fix the issues in the euro area, even if it was not the euro area alone that had the problems. I know it's now very popular to say it's a euro area crisis. First of all, let's make it clear. The euro is a very strong, credible currency, one of the 2 biggest currencies in the world, and in terms of value, it remains extremely strong. What we had was a problem, a combination of problems. Irresponsible financial behavior in many areas of the financial service sector, also accumulation of excessive debts of some of our governments. And this, of course, with imbalances at European level. So this has put some specific challenges to the euro area. So we have to fix things in the euro area. And of course, it's difficult to build the lifeboats in the middle of the storm. What we have been doing is exactly that. For instance, to create this European stability mechanism. It's a very powerful instrument that we had to create to respond to this kind of financial instability. And this is very important because without giving a clear answer in these matters, there is no confidence. And without confidence, there is no investment, no growth, no jobs. But apart from that, what we believe we have to do is act in several fronts. One, of course, put order in the public finances. They have to be under control. We cannot systematically live above our means. Secondly, structural reforms for competitiveness. Some of our countries are lagging behind in terms of competitiveness. Third, investment for growth, because the key answer is growth. Only if we invest, we can have more possibilities to create more jobs. So it's a complex policy mix. There is not a magic solution. There is not a kind of a miracle. Those who propose to people like a miracle solution, in fact, I'm saying they are not telling the truth. It is a difficult process, sometimes with sacrifice in the short term, but I believe this is the only way if you want to keep what in the European Union we call the social market economy, our model. It's a model of open economies, but a model also of a strong welfare state, a model with protection of environment, protection of consumers. We are proud in Europe. When you look at the parts of the world, unfortunately, they are not in that area so developed as we are, but we need to adapt this model to the new, let's say, challenges of globalization.
And so these challenges, the social unrest, the division in Europe, people are saying that it's a travesty that the EU was awarded, an insult in some respects, that the EU was awarded the Nobel Prize now.
I disagree. As I said to you, I think it's an unfair criticism. I think those that are protesting against the EU could, for instance, make a protest against the tax evaders in their own countries, or against those who were not telling the truth about the national statistics. These were the causes of the problem. when the countries, they were not respecting the rules they have signed, this was not European Union fault, this was national fault. Or when we have countries asking now for aid, but many of their people put all their wealth abroad. They are asking for solidarity of the others, but they don't practice solidarity among themselves. So this is indeed the problem we have. We have to be honest about it. It was not the European Union that created the problem. We are trying to respond. If you ask me, you would prefer to have quicker responses? Certainly. Certainly. And bolder, of course. But we have also to understand that we are a union of free countries. We have 27 countries now. In the euro area, we have 17 different countries. It's not easy to come to an agreement between governments that at the beginning have so different positions. Some that desperately need support. Why do they need support? Because they cannot go to the market and they have the financing to keep their state going. And so they need the loans of other countries. At the same time, it's of course difficult for those countries that are now providing the bulk of support to have the parliaments putting that money to support others. So it's indeed a very, very challenging effort. That explains why there is debate, sometimes difficult debates, but at the end, and I want to make that point, at the end all the decisions were taken against all the negative scenarios that said that Greece by now should be out of the euro. Greece is with us. And the new tranche was approved. And so I think it's important to note this, because if not, if the national politicians say, when there is a success, they say, it's our success. When there is a problem, they say, it's the fault of Brussels. It's the fault of the European Union. I mean, in that case, of course, they should not be afterwards surprised when they see that the level of support for the European Union goes down. And I'm completely aware of what you say. I'm completely aware of the frustration people are feeling. At the same time, we have to have reasonable, rational arguments. And I really believe that the European Union is the solution, or at least part of the solution.
Okay. I'm going to take one more question about the Nobel Peace Prize, and that is from Anya Perez from Spain.
My question is do you think that winning the Nobel Peace Prize changes the external image of European Union among the world?
I think it's certainly a very important contribution, at least for a debate. And as a Democrat, I very much believe in the merits of open democratic debate. It's already launched in the debate. We are discussing it because now, with you here in Oslo, because we received this award for the European Union. And the same debate is going outside, all over the world. And so I think already for that reason, it was a good contribution. Now, yes, it is an occasion for people to not to think about only the day-to-day concerns, but to look at the big picture, to put things in perspective, to remember that some years ago Europe was in war. Some of the most awful moments in mankind history was here in Europe. The Shoah, the Holocaust, it was here, not so many time ago. That you come from Spain, your country like mine, until in the 70s, it was not a democracy. When I was more or less your age, to go from Portugal to Spain was extremely difficult. All the controls, all the Guardia Civil, all the controls, I mean, it was incredible. But two countries completely look, now we even don't know if we are already in Spain or Portugal. Of course, we keep different cultures, but freedom of circulation, what a great achievement. And afterwards, Central Eastern European countries, they were under totalitarian communist regimes. Or the Baltic countries that were in fact under the Soviet regime. They were not even independent countries. And all this happened. And so we have to put things in perspective. Yes, we have many problems today. But this Nobel Peace Prize was a way of reminding us where we come from. And also to correct things that are probably not right now, to see where we are going for the future. Linking also the European Union with the rest of the world.
So now we're going to move on to the economy. We've touched upon the economy already, but we have a question from Claudio Apostu from Romania.
Thank you. Mr. Barroso, first I would like to congratulate you for the work that you've done with the European Union and all the achievements, and also for winning the Nobel Prize. Referring to the question, we've seen that Europe is striving to economic Union, like all the monetary and political, all the fiscal policies that are being implemented. Yesterday you've touched upon the ground of a political union. Do you still find it possible? Or what would be the time frame for it, steps or challenges that you foresee?
Yes. I think it's indispensable to have what I call the genuine EMU, Economic and Monetary Union, namely for the countries in the euro area. Because at the end, the credibility of a currency depends on the solidity of the institutions or the political construct behind it. This is why we need further steps. It's not because of an ideological reason. Okay, some of us are passionate Europeans and we believe it's the way to go. But even without this passion, people understand that to have a common currency, we need to have more coordination in economic terms, in fiscal terms. And of course, if you want to have more coordination in fiscal terms and budgetary matters, then we are touching fundamental points of national sovereignty, because it's the powers of national parliaments. That's why we have to discuss the political issues of accountability and legitimacy. And that is why we need afterwards to discuss what we call usually a political union. How far are we going in terms of sharing sovereignty, in terms of pooling our competences? This is why we are, in the Commission, we are pushing for a political union. Once again, a political union that is not built against our countries, but with them. I really believe that in the 21st century, even the biggest countries of Europe, they will not have the leverage to discuss in an equal footing with our American friends or with China or other big powers. But inside the European Union, yes, we can influence the rest of the world and also defend our values and why not also our interests. So this is why I think it makes sense to go deeper in the political integration, respecting of course the national level, but accepting that we have to share the sovereignty for those purposes. That's why the monetary union and the economic union are also linked with further steps in terms of political union. I've spoke about the federation. We already have some federal elements in the European Union. The Commission is a federal institution, in fact, or the European Central Bank, or even the European Parliament that is directly elected by citizens. But now, how far can we go in terms of more integration? Of course, it depends at the end on the will of the member states, the European countries, how far they want to engage in that, let's say, integration. And that's why a European debate is really necessary. And I even suggested that the next European elections in 2014 could be an occasion for that debate. Until now, as you know, most of these elections are 27 national elections. And I think we need a European election to have this debate in the public space of Europe about where we are going, how far we can go, what we need to do, not only for the common currency, but for the European Union as a whole.
And briefly, as we've got a lot of areas to cover and lots of students we'd like to speak to, Claudio's question also touched upon a time frame. Is it possible to envisage a time frame?
I can make a joke there. There was a famous British Prime Minister who said, in life, in political life, you should always have targets, objectives, and a timetable, but never both at the same time. What I mean by that? What I mean is that I really don't know. And we have to be honest about this. I wish it as soon as possible. But we have to accept it's a debate. It's a step-by-step approach in Europe. So some concrete steps I can tell you. I hope that this week we agree on the first step on the banking union. That will be a single supervisory mechanism. Afterwards, we are going to come with a resolution mechanism. So we can discuss about a possible revision of the treaty after the election, so in 2015. That we can discuss. Now, how long does it going to take? Frankly, I cannot say. I wish it is rather sooner than later, but I have to respect the pace of democracy, the rhythm of our national democracies as well.
Is it inevitable?
Nothing in life is inevitable. That's important, that's one point. What I think is we have to think about alternatives. And I think the alternative to more integration is irrelevance. I think the Europeans, we are a very small part of the world's population. We are relatively rich compared to other parts of the world. But if we are not united, for the reasons I said, in the 21st century, dimension counts a lot. What's going on with this financial sector evolution, technological, the media revolution, the information society? If we don't project our values as much as possible in a coherent manner, there is the risk of irrelevance. Okay, we can be a museum, great, we have great history in Europe, beautiful works of art, but do we want to be a museum where people from other parts of the world come to honor the past, or do we want to have a word in the future? I think we should try to have a stronger word in the future. That's why I believe it's not inevitable, the European integration, but if we don't do it in a proper way, we run the risk of being marginalized, being the periphery of the decisions that are going to be taken in the 21st century.
Now I'm going to take a question from Goodman from Sweden.
Mr. Barroso, it troubles me a lot to see nationalistic and extreme right-wing parties grow in the wake of the economic crisis. My question is, what shall we do to prevent these forces to grow more? As I see it, this is the most dangerous thing for our stable peace in Europe.
I agree with you. It's true that in times of fear, times of anxiety about the future, we see radical forces, extremism. What is populism? Populism is a trend to make very complex things appear as simplistic. It's the manipulation of emotions, of fear, against what I consider positive values. I think xenophobia, racism are negative values. And we see them now appearing here and there. The way to do it, to win that battle, is through debate, more democracy. Is leadership. Is our politicians at national level as well, those in government or in opposition, to tell the truth, to discuss what are the alternatives, why we need to work together with one another in Europe, why, for instance, we need to be open in the 21st century, why we cannot. We are the biggest trade bloc in the world, Europe. Protection is self-defeating. But of course, I understand very well, someone who is in a kind of a sector that feels threatened, what is the immediate reaction? To close. There is a temptation to close in times of difficulty. And so that is the situation where we see more trends for this kind of extremism. So I think we can win that battle against extremism if we have a debate, democratic debate, and if we ask our leaders at all levels to engage in that debate.
So more democracy, but not censorship, as we're seeing in some countries. We're thinking of banning certain parties.
Censorship, I mean, what do you mean? I'm against censorship. Now, I understand well that some, that's more a matter for national competencies, but for instance, propagation of hate or Nazist, racist propaganda, can we accept it or not? It's a matter for national constitutions. I think freedom of press, freedom of opinion is a sacred principle. At the same time, I mean, if someone is now making a, let's say, publicity or propaganda, how to kill someone, I mean, so there are some limits. They have to be very well described in terms of the rule of law, but in fact, there are also some issues of responsibility. It's a very delicate issue. In the doubt, I always prefer freedom, because I know by experience in my own country when there was no freedom. But at the same time, I think we have to have a culture that says that some behavior in terms of communication, I mean, have to have some restriction, because if not, we see, I mean, forces that are propagating hate and xenophobia or racism, and I think this is the ethical limit that we have to admit.
We can now take a couple of country-specific questions, and we have Federico from Italy.
Mr. President, I'm Italian, and I think that in the last 13 months, the implementation of structural reforms and a deep change in the leadership of my country has sent a strong signal to the market and to the Europe all. But I also think that to gain credibility is a long and laborious process, but to maintaining it is a permanent challenge. So what do you expect now from Italy and in the near future?
Which is particularly relevant now with the
I will
situation
not,
of Mario
I'm
Monti.
sorry, but I will not comment on internal politics. What I can, you understand, because I have to respect precisely national democracy and respect Italian democracy. What I can tell you, and following precisely, I think, what you said, is that whatever the political plays and political discussion, and one thing is sure, Italy needs to keep a strong commitment to reforms. Italy also has no magic solution. The outlook, the economic outlook remains negative for Italy. So I think it's not credible. People who say now they are coming with magic solutions from one day to the other. So, as you said, credibility takes time to be restored. It is to be a constant process. And I encourage, of course, all the political leaders in Italy to commit to some basic issues, some national consensus. Of course, afterwards there are points of discussion. Why? Because we need a strong Italy, stable Italy at the center of the European Union. Italy is a founding member. We are all here also because there was the Treaty of Rome that created the European community. And I have to say that Italy now, thanks also to Prime Minister Monti, has been playing a very important role in the debate in Europe. And the very important point I want to make about Italy or about any country of the European Union, the European Union is not a foreign power in our countries. Italy is Europe, and Europe is also Italy. So if people are not happy with the way European Union is going, the best thing is to give their contribution and try to make it to change, and not to present European Union as something that is coming from outside. So I really hope that Italy keeps its strong European vocation. The Lisbon Treaty was ratified in Italy by everybody, not a single vote against. It was the best result all over Europe. So Italy has a record of being very pro-European. I hope that it will keep it.
You said you appreciated working with Mario Monti. How do you think what will be the impact of his resignation?
No, I cannot make this kind of comments because I will in that case enter in internal politics. What I can say is that we have been working, of course, very well with Mario Monti. He is a very committed European. And now it's up, of course, to the Italian people to take decisions about the people that they want in government. It's not
But it's
my
imperative
role.
to continue on the path.
What is important, whoever is in the government, whoever is that a national commitment, a national consensus on some basic issues. Because, and there was success. The costs of financing of Italy have been going down. That was extremely important. Exports are going up. So very good elements that in fact show that reforms can pay off. But this is a matter that requires time. Now, of course, it's not up to the European Commission to say who should govern our democracies. What is important is to avoid, and that I have the duty to say it, to avoid demagogy, to say that now there can be miracle solutions. And because, also because we are linked one to each other. I mean, if there are problems in Italy, it can affect the others. Italy is one of the biggest European countries in terms of economy. In fact, in one of the biggest in the world. You should not forget that. It's one of the biggest economies in the world. And so we need to have these countries not creating problems to others because of decisions that they take, or decisions that sometimes they don't take.
Okay. We're now going to look at another crisis-hit country, and we've got Nicola Wong from the United Kingdom.
President Barroso, do you believe that financial aid and debt cancellation are viable options for Greece, considering how high corruption levels are?
I think Greece is making a huge effort. I think this government, coalition government, took very important, courageous decisions, and I think they deserve our support, the support of the European Union. From an economic point of view, I have to tell you, it will cost much more. A default of Greece will be much more costly to the others than to support Greece, provided that Greece respects, of course, the commitments taken regarding the other countries. So yes, I think that they deserve the support, but there is a kind of homework for Greece to make. For instance, precisely fighting against tax evasion and tax fraud. And this is part of the program that we are implementing, of course, or supporting the Greek authorities to implement. And that's an important point, like addressing some problems in terms of administrative capacity. But yes, I really believe that it is good and positive to support Greece. And also for the credibility of the euro area, it is vitally important that Greece remains as a member of the euro.
If work to fight corruption doesn't take place fast enough, credibly enough, would the EU withdraw support for Greece?
Look, I usually don't like to answer, let's say, speculation scenarios. I mean,
but Transparency International has recently given it a very bad rating in terms of corruption again.
Yes, not only to Greece, to be honest. There are other countries as well. But precisely, they are members of our union, so what we have to do is discuss with them the way to solve the problems that exist. I don't think that it will be helpful now to let Greece down. I know the sacrifices that the Greeks are doing are immense. I mean, and the Greek people, like any other people, is a hard-working people. I don't like prejudices. There are sometimes prejudices and stereotypes. The problems in Greece were not created by the Greek people in general. There were problems of management. There were problems of in fact, very wrong behavior. I could speak a lot about that because, for instance, the statistics that were given to the European Commission were not always accurate, but I cannot put the blame on the Greek people in general, frankly. The Greek people, like any other people in Europe, they want to work in honesty, they want to give their contribution, they want their sons to go to school, they want the results, but sometimes there are systemic problems of organization of the country. And so I really believe that we should avoid all kinds of prejudices, and if there are problems, let's work to solve them. Because I trust that this country is perfectly able to overcome the current difficulties if there is the leadership, courage to explain. And one of the issues I'm now seeing in the leadership in Greece is that they are no longer saying it is the fault of others. That was a problem at the beginning. They're saying, oh, it's the fault of others. Now they say, no, we have this responsibility, let's do it. Not because we are in the euro, because if Greece was not in the euro, they would have to do the same or even much more difficult tasks. That's the point. In political terms, you have always to think about alternative. The situation is bad. Okay, I accept. It's very difficult. And what is alternative? Is a breakdown? Is Greece not to be able to finance itself, not to keep the schools, not to keep the public services, not to keep the social security? Is this the alternative? If a country cannot get the financing in the market, how can they do it? If there is not support either from the European Union or from the IMF. So this is the reality. And politically, we have always to think about the alternative. And the alternative, in that case, I think it will be much worse, namely for the Greek people.
We've got limited time, but we've still got a lot of questions from you. And now we'd like to move on to questions that really affect you, the youth, the future generations. And we have Jonas Romer from Switzerland.
Mr. President, what effect do you think the high youth unemployment rate in the south of the European Union will have on the European Union in the future?
It's a very negative effect, precisely because, first of all, it's a tragedy for those who are in that situation, for the families. And as we have spoken before, also one of your colleagues, part of this negative views about this extremism can be built precisely on this. People without hope, they tend to go for desperate solutions. So that's why it's an extremely serious challenge, the problem of unemployment. That's why we are trying to do what we can with our instruments. Just last week, the European Commission announced a program where we called it Youth Guarantee. It is a program that we are proposing to our governments that after 4 months of concluding education, all the governments should offer the possibility to the young people either to, if they don't find a job, preferably to find a job, but if not, to go for a traineeship or an apprenticeship. And we are going to put money on that. It's European Social Fund through small, medium-sized companies, for instance. It costs money, that program, but I really believe it's worthwhile doing. It's worth doing it because it's better to have young people having more opportunities for training, complementing their formation, or even studying, enlarging their horizons, than to keep these people in an employment situation. So I hope the member states now will approve it. And we are going to use all the instruments we have at European level, because we can do things when we have the proper tools and instruments. But with the member states' contribution, it can work. That's we are being very practical, trying to find some concrete solutions.
Realistically, so there are measures that you're trying to put through, but when you're looking at situations in Spain where there's 50% unemployment amongst youth, what's the realistic outlook for these young people?
Look, the realistic outlook is that we are now working to solve the problem through several measures. I have mentioned measures before. Some are more systemic measures to increase confidence in the situation in those countries. Others is through these instruments that we have. I can only use the instruments I have. I cannot use instruments I don't have. For instance, redirecting the structural funds for this kind of programs I've mentioned. Also increasing mobility in Europe. That's another point, a very important
then
point.
I shall interrupt you and we'll have Nina, who has a question specifically about that.
Okay.
And Nina's from Norway.
Yeah. Hi, Mr. President. The numbers of Erasmus students that are going to an exchange since the beginning in 1987 is going to reach 3 million. To what extent do you think actually that student flexibility will affect labor flexibility?
Yeah. I think it's extremely important, that point. Yes, we are very proud of the Erasmus program. You are also in that program, so you know better than me. I've never been an Erasmus student. When I was your age, there was not yet. But in fact, the first time I had an opportunity to go out of my country, I went to Switzerland, in fact, not a European Union country. I made there my postgraduate studies. But what I want to say is the following. We have to change the paradigm. In the 60s, in the 70s, in Europe, when people were going from one country to the other, was that idea of migration. It's almost like losing everything. We lose our country, we have to go to work for another country. Today's world is different. People, they are much more mobile. Also, the travel is much more frequent. And so, to work or to study in another country is not necessarily negative. It can be very positive. And one of the issues we have in Europe is that there is a mismatch between the studies and the employment. We have countries where we have people unemployed. You have mentioned Spain. But I spoke with Chancellor Merkel and Mariano Rajoy about this. They are looking for those competencies also in Germany. So is it really so bad to live and work or study in Germany? I don't think so. So, because also we are all citizens of Europe. It is true that before the European Union membership, some people were not treated with respect in the other countries because they had not the same rights. In terms of European citizenship, I think it should be more and more common that we go from one country to the other, and of course when you can and if you want to come back or are in our own country. But this mobility is important. That's why the Erasmus program is also important, because people are used to travel and to, if needed, to make some kind of work or study in another country, but a country where all their rights are respected as if they were citizens of that country. And in fact, they are also citizens of Europe, because the European citizenship is something we add. We are Spanish, we are French or British or German, but we have our citizenship at the same time the European citizenship.
Some students are worried about the future of Erasmus with the financial crisis, and we have Petra Lazic from Croatia.
Mr. President, what is the future of Erasmus? In view of the financial crisis, what alternatives are there for financing student exchanges? Thank you.
I am confident, and from that I have good news. The good news are that now I have the budget for next year. I don't know if you follow, but there wasn't a problem. The government were not accepting our proposal. It's in fact, I think, 19 million euros for next year, so that we can keep our Erasmus program. It was approved by the governments. I think it's going to be approved tomorrow by the European Parliament. So, okay. Now, about the next financial perspectives, next budget for the next 7 years, we are going to discuss it beginning of next year, so we are already discussing it informally, but I hope there will be a decision on the budget for the next 7 years. Our goal is to have 2 million more students, 2 million Erasmus students more, adding to the 3 million that we already have in the next period of 7 years. And we are also creating new instruments like the possibility of guaranteeing loans for postgraduate students. So our goal is to have 330,000 students benefiting from those. So there are the commercial loans, but we can give guarantees to increase precisely mobility. I think it's one of the most beautiful programs we have in the European Union is Erasmus, and so we are trying to deepen it. I hope now the governments will accept to put the necessary financial resources, because once again we can do it if we have the tools and if the governments want to give the tools. But I'm pretty confident that we are going to keep and even reinforce our instruments for mobility in Europe, for students, but also for young people that are not necessarily studying at the high, let's say, high studies level, but they are, for instance, so-called what we have now, the Leonardo program, to allow people to have a professional experience in another country.
Now, we began a little late, so I take it we can continue a little bit longer over time. So we're now going to look at the future of Europe, which is, as we've been talking about, a major concern. And Veronika Fazekas, I have no idea how to pronounce that, is here from Hungary.
Thanks. My question is, what do you think, what are the biggest challenges facing the EU in the next 5 years, and how will the EU deal with them?
And briefly.
Because I'm sorry, sometimes I'm not so brief, but you have put so interesting and difficult question. This one, I think the biggest challenge is precisely to deepen the economic and monetary union at the same time that we are keeping the integrity of the European Union, namely in terms of the single market. For the reasons I've mentioned, I will not repeat now, we need to go deeper in the EMU. We need to make clear that we have all the instruments we need for the countries that share a currency. At the same time, the European Union today is not just for these countries. Most of them intend to join, but there are at least 2 that have some kind of exemption. So we have to find a way that everybody feels that it is in the same community, in the same union, at the same time that part of the European Union has to achieve a higher degree of integration for the sake of the common currency, because it gives also them more responsibilities. And I think this is work in progress, and I believe we are going to do it. Even, I mean, 5 years, it's a good, let's say, time frame. But of course, I cannot, as I said before, commit on a specific timetable. At the same time, I hope that now we are going to have a new member, Croatia. One of you comes from Croatia, and I hope that the negotiations with others that are candidates are also going to progress well.
Those are practical measures. We've got a real concern that Europeans no longer believe in Europe. I think a recent Eurobarometer survey put trust in Europe at 31%. How can Europe have a future if Europeans as a whole no longer believe in the project?
It is very much linked to the economic sentiment. We have seen that over the years. If you ask the same Eurobarometers, they ask how much trust you have in European institutions, but if you see the answers, how much trust you have in your national governments, sometimes they have even much lower trust in the national government. That is the reality. What's going on is very serious. There is a mistrust of the common citizens on elites in general, on the governments, on the European institutions, on bankers, on the so-called elites. That's why populism is such a threat. That's why we really need to address the social concerns, apart from the social justice itself. But I believe for a project to be sustainable over time, we need to have the necessary political support. So we are perfectly aware of these concerns we have expressed. And in fact, I understand, I very well understand. When people are living in such difficult conditions, of course they turn against institutions, And when there is no hope, the situation is much worse. Now, what can we do? This is the point. What we can do is not give up on our values, not give up on our commitment, is to work for a solution for the current economic situation, namely the problem of unemployment. That's what we are doing.
So it's transitory?
Yes, I hope so. Yes, in the history of European integration, we knew that's not the first time it happens. Now it's probably more acute because of the financial crisis, but we had very difficult moments. People were speaking some years ago of eurosclerosis. There was very difficult moments in the history of the European integration. But as Jean Monnet, the founding father, or one of the great founding fathers, said, Europe is the sum of its crises. And usually it comes out of each crisis stronger. I really believe that's going to happen. Because now, under the pressure of the crisis, we are addressing some of the structural problems we have in our economy so that we can become more competitive. I really believe that at the end of this process, it is a painful, difficult process, the European Union and our countries will get out of it stronger than before. They have, and showing their resilience to the current challenges.
You touched upon expansion, and Christian from Luxembourg is amongst us.
Mr. President, my question to you would be, how far do you think is the European Union going to expand in the future?
It's
future, how far would you say?
Well, I would say, well, first of all, in the near future, like, is Turkey going to join? Or, well, there's actually multiple layers there, so, but let's just say in the near future.
Okay.
Look, I cannot commit to a precise figure or date, and also the number of countries, because it depends on the countries themselves making necessary reforms, and also about the situation in the other countries. Are they ready or not to accept new members? Now, good news, Croatia is going to join this year. It's another country of former Yugoslavia that was recently in war joining, after Slovenia is already a member. And two other countries of the former Yugoslavia are making real progress, namely Montenegro. It's probably the most advanced in that region in terms of the conditions required. Serbia now also, we got them encouragement, even there are still issues to discuss. So I think in the future all Balkan countries have a reasonable and expectation to join, and I believe they are becoming members of the European Union sooner or later. I would prefer sooner rather than later, but that does not depend on us. It depends also on the countries themselves, their capacity to meet some standards. There is another country that is applying for membership. It's Iceland. We have going on. Iceland is a very developed country, as you know. It went through difficult times, but it's a very developed, a democracy established for a long time. And we are making progress also in negotiations. But once again, there are some files that require attention. With Iceland is fisheries. And it's a difficult issue. But okay, we are making progress also with Iceland. These are the countries I see in the not distant future as candidates to the European Union, members of the European Union. But of course, at the end, it depends on the people of those countries, if they will or not want to become members, and also the capacity of the European Union to integrate them.
And Christian specifically mentioned Turkey.
Turkey, I think it's more difficult because, let's be honest, there are some challenges regarding Turkey, and also because in some of our member states there is negative opinion regarding the possibilities of Turkish membership. So we are engaged with Turkey in negotiations. In fact, progress was achieved. But if you want an honest answer, I believe it's going to be more difficult, at least not in the short term.
Okay, so we've talked about expansion. What about contraction? We've got Britain and the increasingly Eurosceptic voice in Britain. It might have a referendum in a couple of years' time. If you're a betting man, and maybe you are, would you say that Britain will stay in the EU?
I'm not a betting man, but I can make a bet that they will stay, yes. I think it's important for us and for Britain to stay in the European Union. I understand the challenge and the debate, but I think Britain has been giving a lot to the European Union. Many of our points in the agenda from the internal market to open trade to enlargement. Britain has been a very strong supporter of enlargement. They were also developed thanks to a great British contribution, and also, for instance, the fight against climate change. The Commission proposals, my first Commission, we are leaders now in the world in the fight against climate change. The government of Tony Blair played a very important role. Without the support of Britain, it will be very difficult to have this agreement at European level. Now, having said this, of course, it depends on Britain itself. I mean, we want Britain to be with us if Britain itself wants to be with us. That's a decision our British friends have to make, and I'm sure they are debating it. We have to understand the debate, because in fact the European Union now is discussing very fundamental issues, regarding this issue of sharing sovereignty for the euro area. So these are fundamental issues, and we cannot put the blame on people because they are discussing these matters. So what I hope is that it will be a debate informed by facts and not informed by prejudice. Sometimes it's true. We have seen this prejudice and stereotypes and caricatures. Europe, it's very popular sometimes. But I hope those that want Britain to be in the European Union, they will win that debate. And in fact, that's the position of the British government. They are in disagreement with some policies, yes, but at the same time they are very clear. They want to remain in the European Union. Just yesterday, Deputy Prime Minister Clegg came here, and we had a working lunch afterwards, and he said it's in the most clear terms. And one of the points he mentioned, I can share with you, he said, because young people in Britain, they prefer to be in the European Union.
Let's take our final question then from these young people with us. It's a joy to be with you. And we have a question from Roman from Latvia.
Hi, Mr. President. I have a general question. In your opinion, how will the Europe look next 10, 15 years? From sociological and geographical aspects. From
a sociological point of view.
Oh my God. As I've told you, I think we are going to get from this stronger. Look at your country, Latvia. Latvia was one of the countries that made the most difficult sacrifices. People speak not so much about Latvia, but it has been a great, great adjustment program. It's not in the euro, but in fact they have done it without devaluation, our Latvian friends. And now they are already seeing possibilities of growth. So the programs, if properly implemented, they can work, as we are seeing also with Ireland. Portugal is also making progress. So when people say, oh, the programs are not going to work, this is not true. They are working. They can also not work, but it's possible to work if there is a strong commitment, strong leadership. And so, for instance, your country, I'm sure that if there is no accident, it's going to be much better. You said 5 years, 10 years? How much? You said 20 years? So I think your country, the quality of life in your country is going to go up. By the way, thanks also to the European support structural funds. Do you have an idea that in some of our new member states, the public investment in those countries, more than 75% comes from the structural funds of the European Union? So it's extremely important, the support we can give also at European level. So if you look individually to the countries, I think, for instance, the new member states, if they don't make mistakes, all of them, you will see the GDP per capita going up, quality of life going up, life expectancy going up, child mortality going down. We have seen that also with Spain, with Portugal, with Greece over the years. At the same time, now we have to address collectively some issues of lack of competitiveness. And that is why these lessons of the crisis have to be taken seriously. So it is not just making expenditure in terms of investment, it's trying to see where we invest to avoid some investments that do not increase our competitiveness. So I'm confident, I'm really confident that 5, 10 years from now, Europe will be in a much better shape than today. I hope at the same time that we are collectively going to solve some of the issues I mentioned before in terms of the governance in the euro area and beyond. But I think we are drawing the good lessons of this crisis, and we will get out of the current situation stronger.
So on that positive note, we're going to wrap up the global conversation. I'd like to thank you, all the students, and of course, President Barroso, for being with us.
Thank you very much.
Very interesting debate.
I really think it is.